Anyway, so I'll call the meeting to order at 7:34. We're a little light, but again, Eric said he couldn't come. I don't know where Dave is. Bill Wright's meant to be calling in. Otherwise, and Tom Lockefeld at the boat club meeting, which I knew this was a conflict.
Are we on the phone now?
No, Bill Wright was going to call in, but he hasn't yet. So, and I don't know where Dave Deaver is. But why don't we, get to work? And first thing would be we've got minutes from April and May. If someone would propose that we approve those in a second, we get to that business. So, how about April 1st? Anyone second?
Second.
And hopefully people have had a chance to read them. Everybody approve? Yep. And May? Same thing. Same thing. Everybody approve? Good. Okay, so we're set on those. Get two of those ticked off. That's great. And now that this has gone off, I will put it back on. I think that's what's happening here. All was working prior. So the agenda, people have it. My thought was we talked a little about Great Island, which obviously has advanced a lot since we last talked. This is meant to come on. Here we go. It is on now, believe it or not.
Yes.
Yeah. Cut the lights here, and we'll just. My thoughts on Great Island aren't very structured. But I thought it made great sense for us to pick up the conversation on this and see what there is that might come of our conversation. So with the town marching forward as it is, and I guess there's some distance to go from what this internal approval to execution, which is end of August?
Ideally, the closing would be September 5th. There is a petition circulating to get signatures to bring it to a referendum. The individual circulating it.
Is there still time to do that?
Yeah, there is. They have 30 days. My understanding is that the application needed to be taken within 10 days, which it was. And they have 30 days to get 750 signatures. I don't have a sense of the status.
To get it to a referendum.
To require a referendum, and then to go to the referendum, and then, it's a reasonably high bar to overturn the RTM stuff.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
That is out there, but as far as I know, the town is proceeding ahead with diligence.
Well, it certainly is exciting. It's certainly a big event, and it certainly has a lot of unformed aspects, right? And I'm not talking about any of the closing aspects. I'm not privy to all the trips and traps that there may be in those. But in terms of if it does close and go forward, what I've tried to do on the agenda is put forward some items that I think we should discuss, if only to gauge people's temperature, to know how we should interact with the Board of Selectmen as they go forward and the rest of the town goes forward with what do we do with this parcel of land. So if ever there was an advisory, role, one would think it would involve us when it comes to coastline here. There's just a lot of aspects of the coastline that are unresolved if we should buy it. And so I thought let's bring up some of those and gauge our temperatures for interacting with the town. Again, this highly relevant advisory assignment that we may have. Whether the Board of Selectmen asks us to advise or not, we should maybe think of having a view and interjecting it in the process. And so I brought up some points here, but maybe first just look at this map if none of you have seen this before. There's a coastal shoreline zone, which is number 4 on this. It's the light blue going around. And I'm not thinking we really have anything to do with anything except that. Lori, I think a lot of this is in your zone, obviously.
Not necessarily, just to tell you what I know, which is time. Assuming it goes through, we'll just go with the premise that it's, going to happen. There's been always said the deal's over. It's never over till it's over. But assuming it happens, it has not yet been determined that the island would be designated as parkland, which would put it under the purview of the Parks and Recreation Commission. if I was a betting woman, I would say that that won't happen certainly right away.
What are the alternative designations?
It's just a town-owned piece of land that falls under the management of the Board of Selectmen.
And Monica was quick to correct me when I used the word town park.
Right,
No, nothing to do with a park, this is town land.
it's town land. For instance, Highland Farm is not a designated town park. The nuance is once a piece of property is designated as a town park, effectively it's a park in perpetuity, so the town loses flexibility. The only way you can then turn around and sell that property is if you can replace it with an equal-sized parcel, which for a town like Darien is very, very difficult to do. So, might it happen someday? Maybe. I know there's certainly people who feel it should, but I would suggest that early on, the town really doesn't want to do that till they really work through.
Who manages
Everything.
Highland Farm as a town property? Does
The
Parks and Rec?
Recreation
still have-
Department has been charged with the maintenance. It's the old
Oxridge,
Oxridge
the
Horse
field at
Farm,
Oxridge.
the big field.
Oh,
Immensely popular. I
It's
see
very
people
popular.
walking there every day. It's wonderful.
So the town department manages it. They take care of the mowing and all that, but it does not fall under the
It is not
responsibility
technically
of the Park and Recreation Commission, which many people find confusing, which I understand. So at this point, I would not anticipate that Great Island would be designated parkland for some fairly long amount of time until all the work can be done. If you attended any of the various public meetings, the district meetings, the town meeting, or whatever, certainly people spoke about their desire to have a separate commission formed
Yeah.
just for the oversight of Great Island. Again, don't know if that will happen or not, or whether it will be a committee appointed
I thought it seemed,
reporting to the selectmen. You know, there was some mention if that happens, that, you know, townspeople or each party could apply, they'd come to citizen, but then there would be representatives from various stakeholders. The Parks and Recreation Commission was certainly mentioned, and I would think that this body, you know,
one would hope, yeah.
would have a representative as well. Again, not my call, but
Yeah.
if you're going to have the different commissions in town and different bodies that can offer insight into the different aspects of the decision-making, I would think you guys would want to be doing that. But again, that's TBD. What the governance of the property will be is to be determined at this point.
I was heartened that on this chart, this map, where they conceptualized sort of 4 zones to do things, that they gave the coast its own zone.
Yeah.
And I actually think that was a really smart move and one that bespeaks its importance. And the letter I wrote to the town was sort of, I really didn't do it as a commission head, although I mentioned I was the head of commission. But I wrote personally how much that coastline means to me and like raising my kids. And also in the context of Long Island Sound, you know, the various shorelines we've all seen as boaters, how great a shoreline it is. So to me is that important that it's singled out as an asset in its own right. And I just was, you know, I think this was done before I wrote my letter or talked to Monica about anything. So I think just someone had the foresight to see that also. Then it speaks of a bigger task, I think, for us, hopefully, about protecting that shoreline and what to do with it, and the intersections of Park and Rec and the town purposes. So, I mean, if you, you know, without knowing that much more about this, what they, maybe Board of Selectmen or whoever's envisioning this intent, I think they threw out a whole bunch of ideas that could happen along the shoreline. I know, for example, they listed potential uses: coastal ecology, a discovery walk, water sports, kayak, paddleboard, boating and sailing opportunities, fishing and clamming, 1.5 miles of dramatic coastline, coastal stewardship, water quality education, climate change education, scenic overlooks, Sunset Island vistas. So I don't know, that's sort of a laundry list of what a nice coast does, I guess, services it provides and things. But I thought, like, specifically, what I think immediately falls into our campus, like the access for town clamming, for fishing, for the kayak and SUPs, and also the mooring field policy. I know that falls outside of our purview, but we have I think, a voice to have opinions on that. I don't know, so maybe, I just thought we could maybe lead the discussion with, when you all see this in the context of the Great Island Purchase, what's jumping out at you as some of the most important things that we should be doing to advise the selectmen on protecting this or enhancing it or utilizing it best? And don't everybody say something at once.
Well, let's talk about the moorings, because I think that's actually a huge policy question that needs to get sort of addressed sooner rather than later in the process. The moorings in Ziegler's Cove, probably everybody knows, are privately owned right now, but functionally are a public asset, because everybody goes in
First
and
come,
picks
first
them up.
served, yeah.
And, but they are, I believe, close to 100% what I'll call transient moorings, which is people don't actually keep their boats on them for the summer. And they don't keep their boats on them when they're off the boat. And so one of the big forks in the road right off the bat is, are we gonna let people, and again, this is kind of John Keena's direct responsibility, but it's something we should all be thinking about and weighing in with this selectmen, I think, which is, are we gonna let people keep kayaks or dinghies on Great Island that they can use to access their boats on moorings, which has the effect of turning those transient moorings into permanent moorings? And if you do that, you change the whole nature of Ziegler Cove very quickly, because all of a sudden there's real boats on these moorings. They're all taken up, and the harbor's full.
Yep. It's a parking lot.
And so that's something kind of right off the bat, because people are going to want to take their kayak or whatever and just use it to go back and forth, and all of a sudden now you've got permanent boats on moorings.
I think that's a really critical issue. I have very personal views on it, and effectively, it's an aquatic park.
Yeah.
And people from all around come to enjoy it. I think as much as we know town moorings are needed, I think personally it would be a shame to lose that, because so many people get so much enjoyment. And you're right, if all of a sudden those become permanent moorings, there's just really not a ton of room in there. And
Should I put you on speaker?
we've lost something that
No,
has
you're
been,
right, Tom.
personally, I'd love to see those become
Yeah,
town public moorings, which many, many towns have public moorings. And, you go to Oyster Bay or Manhasset, or, all of you cruise know there's so many places we've been, and then you go and you just pay your fee. And, you go and you could do some kind of reservation system. You could have like an annual permit that you pay $200 for the season, and you get a permit too. And on weekdays it's first come, first served, and weekends it's whatever. But to keep that almost a part of the park,
Right.
by having access to it. But that is a critical decision. It's absolutely critical.
Can I ask just two questions about the moorings? Are they maximized? Is there room for
There's like a 17-year wait list for a mooring in Ziegler's Cove.
So that's my second question. So how could they become town moorings if people are already...
So it's a very weird, in a sense it's a very weird and probably not ideal setup the way it is right now, because individuals own those moorings. They have to personally pay for annual maintenance costs of the moorings. They frequently don't use the moorings, and frequently other people pick them up and raft on them and everything. There's no real quality control of the actual moorings themselves. You end up with rafted up boats frequently on those moorings that are way beyond the likely capacity of the mooring down on the bottom. When squalls come in, and there definitely have been times in the last couple of years when squalls have come in, when it was packed in there, that puts a lot of stress on those moorings. There is, I think, a good argument to kind of pulling those back in. And because they're transient moorings, it's different in my mind than kicking someone off their mooring that they keep their boat on. These are not where people keep their boats, but they have first priority. When they want to go to Ziegler's Cove, they can kick whoever's on there off their mooring. But it's a different thing. So you'd have to figure out with the harbor master if you were going to do that. But there certainly is precedent in other towns for them to have municipal moorings that can be available to the general public.
I can't swear to it, but I don't think there's a single permanent boat out there this summer. I mean,
Yes,
we've been over
if-
enough, and
Yeah, I
there's
agree.
been
There
a
are.
couple nights, are
There are.
there?
There's like a hair shaft 12.5 and a couple of small ones. There's nothing big, but
Not much, but
it has also been this way forever, right? A lot of those moorings and spots are also deeded to homes. So homes on some homes.
Deeded may be a strong word, right? It's just sort of by custom.
Pretty sure that some of the properties, Flip, you may know this, but some of the properties have it in their titles that there's a deeded mooring with it.
I don't actually think that it's close to right, but it's not actually right. I think there's a general concept that if you have a waterfront home, that you can get a mooring because of that, but it's not directly related to a certain location.
So if that is the case, because I've heard of it, which,
But I don't,
yeah.
and I don't know, is there a place where these rules are all written down?
Probably not.
Because if you're changing these things, and if you're gonna say you're gonna change this, or if you're gonna change the mooring field in Roden Bay, Darien Harbor, Ziegler, Scott's, like all the Darien bodies, because you're gonna put different rules in. Well, what were the rules you started with? What are and how are they enforceable? And
Right.
what are the changes and why? Because I think you have to look at all of that as a whole picture.
Absolutely.
so there, I think the answer to that is that there's not really a place that these are all written down, and as a result of that, they're like clear and legally enforceable. There could be a place.
We just don't know what it is.
Either, no,
Oh,
no,
going
there-
forward, you mean?
there has intentionally, historically not been a place, and that's why this is an advisory commission on coastal waters, not a formal harbor commission. If we had a formal harbor
Yeah.
commission, we would have a set of regulations that would spell out all that stuff.
Sure.
And so there may be other ways of approaching that, just with tighter ordinances within the town.
Yeah.
So that, and because of questions like yours, which is a good question, it may be that in our future, we work through this sort of stuff to lay out what the specific rules are.
Yeah.
I mean, as an aside, just my observations, at least this summer, is, it is my understanding that no more than 3 boats are supposed to be rafted, and I've seen way more than that,
8 and
and
10.
it's not,
Yeah.
Well, but
it's not being enforced at all.
There's also a difference between rules and
Right.
enforcement.
Right.
And there's supposed to be no wakes in Darien Harbor. And so,
Well, one of the questions I have about, because I really like the concept of this continuing to be a park, and it's sort of de facto a park. The water is, that is a first come, first served. One of the thoughts I like about converting to some, if not all, town moorings is perhaps we can start to control a little better what's going on there. When people see, oh, I'm just going to hook up this buoy, this casual buoy, it keeps growing. If there's, bright yellow town moorings and there's rules spelled out, maybe that just gets a little momentum and it sort of.
Well, he's no fun. You're not coming to my raft after 30 people.
So, just the town rules maybe get more enforced with a whole new set of buoys and the Marine Police Unit knowing that this is our new area and we're trying to maintain a free access park and and we could turn down some of the rowdiness perhaps also.
I don't think it has to be free. I think you charge, I'm making a number up, $200 a season that goes into a special fund to maintain the moorings. and
There
they-
is no such thing as a special fund in the town.
Parks and Rec has one.
Like a coffee can? Is it the
But
Folgers?
whenever,
or-
and then, you got a little stick or something, and then, but you'd either the police or somebody would have to,
Or it could be a per diem. I mean,
Or per
there's
diem,
all sorts of
whatever.
different models.
Yeah, there's all sorts of different models as you cruise around, up and down the East Coast, you see different towns have all sorts of different, different models and stuff. But
This is like.
I don't know that it should be free, because then you can fund the cost of knowing that the tackle
It's good.
is good, because you go in there, you're going on a wing and a prayer that you're on something that's suitable for your boat.
Big ball, it's gotta have a big mushroom on it.
Yeah, that's kind of what we go with.
I mean, the safety issues are only gonna grow there as the public access grows. And so we probably should be getting out ahead of it with some sort of regulations of what's
I think-
going on there, because there's gonna be a lot more usage. and-
Well, I'm not sure if the public access is gonna get more. It's huge now. Like 4th of July weekend.
But I mean,
oh my God.
off the shoreline.
So here's, that's
yeah.
exactly and this is a big issue, because they're speaking about no loss. The issue of people swimming in Ziegler's Cove, which obviously it's nice to go swimming and stuff, but people swim between boats and stuff, people are driving their boats, people have been drinking all day. It's easy not to see people in the water. And if people start swimming around to that little beach and swimming back, the issue of people being in the water in Ziegler's Cove is the same issue that we have in Darien Harbor, which is that there are some people who like to swim in Darien Harbor. And I know that because I've talked to the police about it, there is no actual law saying you can't swim, even in a navigable channel.
I saw a guy swimming
Yeah.
today.
What?
I saw a guy, he was on a kayak, he jumped off his kayak, he was pushing the kayak ahead of him, swimming to it, and pushing some more, swimming to it, and then eventually he got back
It's
on.
very
Right
easy
now.
not to see those people, especially if you're not expecting them. But that is a big issue. But I don't think, as a matter of Connecticut or federal law, there's any law that says you can't swim in this area.
I guess this is a work to extremes here. Would everybody on this commission be against making that a permanent harbor, like recreating Darien Harbor there? And
Yes.
having, rowboats and launches?
You mean,
Well,
just so the people that would be there,
Or be all residents?
That's where they keep their boat.
'Cause,
Yes.
it's a permanent berth mooring, they
Yes.
call
Are you
it.
asking that just in Ziegler's or around the rest of the coast?
That would be a secondary question, whether you'd start to creep into Scott, but just to talk about
Right.
Ziegler's at the moment. I, for example, really dislike that idea.
Well, I mean,
turning it into a parking
it's
lot.
so small to begin with, and it's like a special place the way it is. I don't know, I mean, I think using it as a swimming destination makes the most sense. It's not, we can pack it full of boats, but that now you ruin the best swimming hole,
Yeah.
it's such a
in the whole
special
area.
place.
It's really special.
It's so special.
For its access on a day mooring basis. Yeah. So I mean, unless anyone thinks differently.
Let the private citizens who have been carrying the cost of the moorings for 30 years continue to carry the cost of the moorings.
That's a different issue, though. I was just trying to explore the extremes, and I think like if John Kena, who is a great guy, but theoretically he's the state of Connecticut, comes in and says, "There's a big wait list issue. I want to put 30 permanent boats, more than in
Because now they can
Ziegler's."
get to
I think we should really oppose that. I think that would be one stance.
I'm in agreement. Yeah.
So that's one extreme taken care of. Then the other extreme might be we don't allow any moorings, or we just allow town moorings, which is maybe we don't want to be there. So we're wondering.
But these questions that you're asking, these issues, does it have anything to do with whether or not the town owns Great Island? Because
It
all
does,
those issues
it
are
does
still-
because if you don't own Great Island, people can't launch dinghies and kayaks
No
and stuff
access.
to get access
That's
to
always
the
been the
boats. So
issue.
that's why it is a transient harbor right now, because there's no real access
Right.
to the boats.
That protects it.
So as
Yeah.
soon as the town buys it and allows kayaks or something, then you have the issue.
There's a dock right there.
Can we divorce this issue from the shellfish bed issue? Because there's a bunch of beds in there, right? And
Yeah,
it's
I
sort of-
think- I
it's
mean, I
very
think it's-
linked.
No, the beds in Ziegler's Cove are not recreational beds, because they're too deep.
Seasonally.
And they're only
recreational.
seasonally open in the winter, so they're not open in the
But,
summer.
but we have the beds outside facing towards Fish Island. So those sort of are in the same,
Yeah, but that's not where you would, those
More,
are
that's
not,
true.
those don't conflict with moorings.
that's
But
true.
we're talking about more traffic and then that's gonna be.
I think her note was
impact.
access, to get, if you have access to those shellfish beds as like a launching point from the Great Island, does it open the door to, well, I take my paddleboard out to the shellfish bed, can I take it out to my mooring, and can I have it there, right? So I think,
Well, that's a different issue. I didn't even thought that.
oh, I
was
thought
just
that's what
thinking-
you were asking.
I was just thinking of the impact of changing the usage of the harbor on the beds, because that's gonna have an impact. If you bring more people in there, you're gonna
It's-
have more disturbance.
It's not clear that it's not clear that it's possible to bring more
I don't think
people.
you can get, it
It's
honestly
pretty
can't
bad.
get any worse than it is now.
Well, this is
Yeah.
why it's seasonally closed, because there are so many people in there, and the presumption is that there is some sort of leakage of sewage or other effluent
From
from
the
boats
land.
that
Yeah, no.
would cause the shellfish to.
No, the people, the boats aren't using their, are just flushing it into the water. They're not using their holding tanks.
Yes.
That,
I don't think it's the people with holding tanks. Let's face it, you got 6 or 8 center consoles wrapped it up, and they're there, they have no facilities, and they're there for 6 or 8, and we all know they're drinking.
Yeah.
You know what's happening.
I mean, we heard CT Aquaculture say this.
Yeah,
This is
you know
why
what's
it's
happening.
provision.
So, I mean, it's almost a separate issue in term, from the Great Island in terms of Ziegler's kind of gotten out of control. I mean, to me, the sort of next most comparable place is Eat and Snack, where we like to go. There's no moorings in there,
Yeah.
so you have to anchor, and they don't allow rafting. And it's a very, you can go on weekend, it's a very, very different.
Yeah, what would
Experience.
people think about doing that? Like, I've thought that, because I can't stand going in there postseason, like I kayak into November and I'll kayak in March, and there's still all these junky moorings around. I would love to just encounter clear water. And you know, if you know how to anchor, that's not a problem, it's not as easy.
The difference between those two, and maybe it's a difference that you would like, but the difference is the scope on a mooring is much shorter
Yep.
than the scope on an anchor. So you can pack more boats on moorings than you can on anchor.
I think you're also making a big assumption that people know how to moor or anchor.
Anchor.
And I don't think.
I'm not
they-
making the assumption, I'm actually knowing that people don't. I've had my share of that entertainment
Sure.
on my
okay,
bow.
so-
But my point is it actually maybe keeps some of the crowds down. And I know that's not the nicest of thoughts, but it also keeps it a more pristine waterway, which is more associated with the beauty of Great Island, perhaps.
I think it would create a more dangerous environment.
Havoc.
Because you have, let's say, a 26-foot center console with a 6-pound day hook and all rope, and you know, Jimmy shows up and throws it over and cracks 14 beers, and you know, something comes up, a breeze comes up, and he drags or whatever. It's not adequate. And
The advantage of moorings, is, in addition to being shorter scope, is you know where the moorings are, so you don't have people anchoring too close. It's not, there's fewer opportunities for user error.
Yeah, the Great Salt Pond is fun when the wind twists around and everybody's.
Although I've seen it.
Yes,
I've seen people not be tied up and drifted.
yes,
yeah, well,
but
But they're
So,
getting
but
into
this,
more.
there's lots of complexity around the whole topic of moorings in there, and that's definitely something that we should all think about.
Yeah, just one thing, if it was all town moorings, there's maybe more control over getting those removed in the winter and having that place look nicer during some of the off-season. Anyway, my personal kayaking idea.
find the beauty in the boat. Start to enjoy it.
It's gotta find that.
Use a filter.
Well, so I think this has been helpful, though. I think, we've got some, in this room, I think, some strong opinions to keep away from making that a permanent berthing mooring field. And we like the idea of keeping it to a day mooring field. And then there's questions about town moorings or private ownership and who gets private ownership. So I think there's a lot we'd like to inject in a committee there.
And then control, I think just better control of what's safety
Yeah, and the safety side.
happening there in terms of
But do we want to
safety.
consider permanent berthing moorings around towards Scotts Cove? And the town
It's the
needs,
same
No, it's the
issue
same.
of access. You can't, unless you're, where do you row a boat
well,
from?
I'm saying, if you own Great Island, you can,
Yeah, you
It's too
you're right.
tidal, unless
could
you're
have
gonna put it in a big dock, it's
could have a
really tidal
northeast.
on the other side.
But you could have a northeast little launch ramp or something there, on the northeast side of, so I think it could be a potential problem if someone proposes that. And there's plenty of anchoring going on there, that's not as mooring ball filled.
There's some, aren't
There's,
there?
yeah, there's
There's some,
definitely,
like, what, a
there's,
dozen?
yeah, a dozen, 15.
I've never been in there.
I think we'll see more in the future.
It has
It's
become,
expanding.
in the last 2 years, it has become another Ziegler's. I mean, in terms of a nice Saturday or Sunday, it's now, you'll go in there and see 20 boats.
You know what else is picked
Nice.
up too?
Nice.
Is Fish Island at low tide. I always thought was sort of a ghost town, and in the past year, this summer for sure, there's a lot of center consoles anchored on the west side of Fish Island, like before the shallow part by the big house. But yesterday there were 25 boats anchored in there, like at dead low tide, which I sort of didn't think that you could have a ton of access, but I guess in a center console, if there's no wake, you can creep in there.
Are people going ashore?
We were passing from the outside, so I didn't
They
sort
can
of.
go up to the high tide.
But just like Scott's in the past couple of years, I think navigation's improved and the ease of navigation with your phones and better chart plotters and everything. I think people are finding those little spots that were
Good.
quiet for a long time.
Could also be Ziegler's is so darn packed. Maybe it's just big expanded.
Overflow.
Yeah.
But you just can't get in, if you don't get there by 10 or 10, you just can't get in.
Yeah, we gave up going to it some years ago because of that. Still
Yeah.
like it as much, it's just too busy.
Just on weekends.
Do you want
We consider maybe like having a kayak launch off one side of the island away from Ziegler's and the boat mooring and try to concentrate people in one area and then keep the motorboaters on the other side.
I was just going to switch to the perfect segue. There's definitely thoughts of adding a kayak rack at the little, sorry, darn bird. You see the beach area? That's labeled kayak rack. When people see that above the number 1, the commons, where they have the 2 little beach houses and there's a sweet little horseshoe beach, they're labeling that kayak launch. So, I mean, I get concerned about that. Does that mean everyone's going to start launching from there and streaming to Fish Island, and then you've got that intersection of kayaks and boats? Do we want to think about the wisdom of that at all?
Well, and there's a related question of kayak launching versus kayak rack. Because it's one thing, seems to me, to be able to launch your kayak and bring it in, take it away with your car. It's another thing to have, we'll end up with the same racks that we have at the boat club right now, just storing plastic and marring
It's a bit
in my
around.
personal view, marring
Yeah,
the natural beauty of the area if we have the racks.
yeah. We have that at Pear Tree and at Wheat now.
I'm a kayaker, love kayaking, but I so agree with that. The boats just instantly go up. You build another 10 racks, they instantly get filled, and what do you have but a bunch of bright colored plastic? That's things sticking like that.
Yeah.
It's sort of incredible. And certainly, if you put them on the shore, it takes that nice little beach, which if you go by, you sort of, I always find it sort of like quiets you down. You just think, I'd love to sit there and have a pina colada all day, But if it's going to be all bright colored plastic, it will just lose that. I mean-
How many people ride horses? You could probably fill, the entire place with a couple thousand kayaks. I'm guessing.
And
Not that close to the water though.
but the town could buy like dollies, could have a dozen dollies and put the racks back in the
Inland.
woods.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something that, because I think that is part of the coastline that you see right on the edge, even though in some ways that's Park and Rec's territory.
No, but we've got them at Weed Beach, they keep expanding, we have a lottery every year, we can't get them, and I'm kind of of the view of they distract from
Right.
the beauty, but I've heard other people say, oh, I just think they're really pretty, the colors are bright and
Yeah,
cheerful,
Pam
and
says
it's
that.
summery, and so,
Is there too, like, a safety issue for having kayaks in a remote, kayaks, paddleboards, whatever they are, in a remote area like that? Like, the boat club or Weed Beach or Pear Tree, like, has some just genuine steady traffic all the time, right? And like, the boat club, the kayaks and the racks are near the boat club. Maybe you tell someone you're going out, maybe you're not. If there's a kayak and a paddleboard launch ramp on the other side of Ziegler's, and it's a spring or a fall day, I mean, yes, you're supposed to be mindful of yourself and tell someone you're going out or not, but it's a lot more exposed. It's a lot more risky to be out there. And what if you go out and you have less likely of coming back, right? I mean, there's less foot traffic, there's less people observing you. On a 4th of July weekend, there's a lot of traffic for eyes, but that's not always the case.
Actually, the entire coastline poses that question a little. Think of all the kids swimming off the rocks. I mean, if I was a teenager, I'd get down day one and start swimming off the rocks there. And I wonder how that's controlled.
Yeah.
But here's our purviews, perhaps more on the boating side. And I
Yeah.
agree with you. It's a good question.
I don't know, this could be a good way to deter that from that area, because there's just not a lot of eyes, or it's too remote.
I've worried particularly about, when I mentioned it earlier, the stream of traffic that might go immediately from that launch point right to Fish Island. And there's sort of an expanse there where you can have a lot of boat traffic, and I think it isn't the best. The motorboats are sometimes zooming in at pretty high speed.
It's the same
for this,
thing coming out of 5 Mile River though, right? I mean, that's where they're all coming from today. And you got a lot of boat
Yeah, but
traffic.
they can stick close to the shore. Here they do a little bit of a stretch across to the Fish Island area.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
kayaks out in the middle of nowhere these days.
Yes.
I mean, honestly, I see people kayaking out to Greens Ledge Light, and they're everywhere already.
Yeah.
It's true. But I think, I just wonder how, like, with the kayak rack signs, how we maybe amplify a message for just what you're mentioning. You're in a harder zone to navigate if you're not that skilled a kayaker here, rather than stick in the harbor where no matter what happens, the wind probably blows you back at the beach.
Just don't put them there. Don't put the rack there. Don't put the access there.
Well, that's where I am with the moorings and the clean water.
Yeah. Different views.
No, I'm here.
Yeah. No.
But there's also the question, Flip, you brought it up, and I thought it was great, about fishing. And that's bound to be a big usage.
Well, there's a couple of related issues, and Parks and Rec already addresses them in some of what I thought were parks. I don't know if everything's a park, as a matter of fact, but there's a lot of good fishing areas off the eastern side of Great Island, and that will be an attractive asset to people who like to fish. But a lot of that occurs at nighttime, and so and yet many of the parks kind of close at night, and there's also picnicking and sunsets and all the, you can imagine people having grill barbecues or something out on some of these promontories that look over Scotts Cove, and that could be a real positive thing. But all of those things get into people being out on Great Island at night, which has all of the obvious complexities to it of policing it, cleaning it, making sure it's not kids with parties, And so how do you balance all of that and to get the most use out of the asset, but do it in a controlled way?
The beaches, the gates get locked at 10. Police and driveways, pear trees wide open, they can see, we're having a lot of issues this summer with after hours activities, like.
Right, and so this is,
Weed or pear tree?
Yeah,
but if you think about it, this would take that
Make it look
to the
easy.
next level of order of magnitude. But it's also some of the best assets that the place has. I mean, and so how do you not throw the baby out with the bathwater?
I think the other thing that I think it was mentioned in the meeting, the town meeting too, but like, I'd really like to see there be stricter policies on access to the property for town residents. Town residents, all day long, same as the pear tree, the beach permit, whatever, the park, it's great. But if you're not from town, you're not paying for it. So I think it should be more difficult for non-townspeople to get it.
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I live near Waveney Park, which is kind of like this without a shoreline. And I go there all the time. And I walk my dog and we ride bikes there. And I've heard the same argument from Buchanan about, trying to control access. And I don't know, it's really any different than Central Park or anything else. I mean, yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I think there's certainly an element of when you have a small beach, if you open that up to a wide group, it becomes overwhelmed, so quickly that it's hard to do that.
But I think you're seeing that at our beaches now. People are taking Ubers down near Water Lane and being dropped off and walking in who aren't townspeople. And
But there's a lot of legal complexity to,
I'm
There
sure
are federal
there's-
laws about being able to access.
like real
Yeah.
legal complexity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's, the last few years, there's been activity in Hartford to,
Access.
well, now we're getting access because we're required to provide access, but there's differential fees for residents and non-residents with the thinking that it's the town residents are paying for the upkeep and the maintenance and all of that. But there's been proposed legislation which hasn't gone anywhere yet in terms of really not being able to charge differential fees and things of that nature. So, but it really, the issue becomes is, and most of the time, we have finite parking. Very often, the roads accessing them are the residential neighborhoods with
Sure.
limited or no sidewalks. There's limited parking, et cetera, et cetera. So they're very tricky issues. They're
Isn't there
very
just
tricky issues.
a big seasonal model out there? I mean, if you look at Greenwich Point or Byram Park, I do a lot of kayaking in the off season where I go to places I can't in the on season. And I sort of feel like I have access just, the other 2/3 of the year. I mean, that I would assume that's going to be adopted here, some sort of.
Well, that's the case. The beaches now, we only charge the parking fee, the summer season.
I mean, I like that in some sense, and I think that provides different people can come and fish from Great Island in the off season, but maybe not in a busy summer. I don't know. A lot of this feels to me to be out of our hands. Bigger. rules.
Well, it's almost, I think there are a lot of considerations on these things that tend to push you towards limiting the hours, limiting the access. I mean, it's certainly from the security and garbage and everything else, clamping down on these things is sort of the easy way to go and might be the right way to go. But I guess the question for us to think about in the capacity sort of as advocates for fishermen, for clammers, for whatever people who want to be enjoying the coastline is, should we be kind of a voice saying, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, let's figure out something that works to give people access to this? Because, when you start to say, okay, we're not going to do those things, you kind of quickly get down to, well, this is going to be a great walking trail. and that's all we're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if we think about wanting to educate and get more people involved who give a darn about the coastline, you have to have them experience it. And I don't care if they're, what town they're from, right? I mean, I think we want to attract people to use the shoreline in the right way. And that's really, that's the ideal objective. We need to think about that. We don't want to create an unsafe situation where you got kayakers, totally blocking very highly trafficked powerboat areas. But I do think we want people to enjoy the shoreline. That's why we're doing this.
I so agree with those statements. I swim to our clamming beds where I think we've got this real tool to do that very strongly. And I wonder how we can't amp up our effort. David, you've been such a backer of let's expand the amount of people getting shellfish licenses. It's just a simple thing. You can measure it every year. Now we actually can have people they don't have to have a boat or a kayak. They can walk literally to the side of the clamming beds.
Close and wide open.
Now,
Yeah.
now all we have to do is have open beds.
Yeah, well, that is another topic I'll come to in about 5 minutes. I've got
Give it, then
that, I've
he
got
takes
that
the-
map. But to me, that's like a first lead here is how do we, what do we do there? What can we proactively do? It just, it can just do all of what you're saying.
And there is I don't know if you all have actually been to Great Island and had a chance to walk around it, but there is, in talking about the kayaks, there is what I will generously call a beach on the north side of Great Island also, a little cove. It's certainly tidal and stuff like that, but you could imagine saying, use that for the kayaks to get in and out of the water.
And
Because it doesn't put them into the Ziegler's traffic.
Puts them into Scotts Cove.
Puts them into around the corner in Scotts Cove.
and there's that one, but literally at our clamming beds on that side of Great Island, there's a little horseshoe beach also. It's
Yes.
maybe just 20 feet and 30
Yeah,
feet
that-
across.
That one has more spartina grass. Kind of.
Yep.
This one around the
Oh,
corner
no,
is
actually-
more like directly in.
The Spartina grass one, I wasn't talking about that, now just go one northward. It's a little diagonal
Oh,
one with
okay.
2 rocks on both sides. And literally you can wade off that into our beds. at low
Yeah,
tide.
I know what you're talking.
Yeah. Just had lunch there for my wife. I knew
So
we were
there are,
trespassing.
but just, I guess the point I'm trying to make is there are other options
Yeah.
for kayaks and paddle boards other than right at that little beach with a hut.
And the trick's going to be balancing access and preserving the ecology. I mean, that's really going to be the balance, because what's so special about the property, if you have the chance to go on it, I was just blown away. I mean, I kind of thought I knew what it would be like. It so far exceeded anything I expected. But it's because it's been effectively underutilized for 100 years, because there is such limited access to it, and it's so pristine. And that's the beauty and the wonder of it, but yet we want people to get on it, but we don't want to be trumped and ruined and the shellfish beds ruined. So that's going to be the challenge for the town, is really balancing that.
How big of, I'm just curious if people have a sense from the town meetings and just talking to friends at parties and things, how big a movement do you think in town is there to keep it pristine? Don't do more of it, do less of it. Do you
That's
think?
my sense, that more people are swayed that way.
Yeah.
If the town goes slowly and not overdevelop it and keep it natural. Not everybody, but I'd say conversation I'm having, people are more swinging that way, and I don't know if it's whether they want the pristine or whether they just don't want the town to spend a lot more money in building stuff, but I think more people are just preserve the tree canopy and
Well,
natural
there's
habitats and
also
whatever.
a lot.
More of what I'm hearing.
There's also a lot of different gradations in those two different definitions. So, I mean, there's the extreme of, oh, we need a new pool, we need a new ice rink, we need all that, which involves a lot of construction, parking space, all that. But then, is it literally just a walking trail? is, can you have little on the promontories, little overlook sites with grills? I mean, there are ways to develop it more intensively, like along the lines of what we're probably all thinking about for our uses, that are not building big structures. So there's a lot of shades of gray in there, I think.
Well, I think, clearly hearing people have opinions on this, we ought to find a way to interject our voice into whatever process is going forward, whether it be a committee or something. So, I mean, on my part, I'm going to keep on speaking with Monica to try to have us have that voice. I don't know what the process is going to be, but I've been talking to her several times on this, and I'll continue saying we've discussed it and we've got views on things. And it's not for us to figure all those views out right now, but I'm not hearing everyone say, oh, it's just going fine. No, we've got some views on how things should be shaped going forward, so I'll try to have us have that voice at the table. And I suspect, Flip, you've got as much access to some of the decision makers as anybody, and Laurie, wherever you think we might inject, I'm all ears to try to figure it out.
Yeah, no, as I said, my view, this is just my view, is that as whatever governing body is created, that, as different appointees are coming from various, I would this group out, so we should have representation.
Sorry, Bill? Thanks, talking to someone else. Incidentally, as an aside here, the shellfish grounds of, we'll switch to shellfish. The shellfish grounds, I understand, are not being sold with the land. The shellfish grounds belong to off this island belong to the Zieglers, and those aren't part of the Steinkrauts. And there's been some discussion about whether they could go, but I don't think that has gotten any traction. I had some discussions with people about that. But if we can switch to shellfish as a topic, because there's plenty to talk about there.
Just before we do, I just wanted to put a suggestion out here. Would it make sense for us to take either a tour of the island or go around the outside by boat and see it? I mean,
Be helpful for
you talk about these beaches and stuff, and I've been in the general area, but I'm not sure I understand what's what. And I think if we had an opinion, regardless of how the governance of the island ends up happening in the town, if we had an opinion of like what's really important on that shoreline that we think should not be disturbed, or if we just had 5 things, hey, here's what we'd like to see not happen. I think it would be good to have that defined.
The best way to see it is to walk it. That you see, having done both, you see it much better kind of by walking around the perimeter than, because you're always a little bit, because there's so many rocks,
Yeah.
You're always a little bit off if you're on a boat.
So the broker was giving tours. There were many, many tours that were conducted. They're mostly for RTM members because these people are going to be voting on it and whatever. I had the opportunity, and some of my other commissioners had the opportunity to go. I don't know they're still conducting them, but I think you could.
Maybe you could go
ask.
in a kayak.
Kayak.
Yeah,
Why don't I ask?
But you
We
could
get to it.
ask whether they could schedule a time.
I'll come back to you. I'll try to
for
do that.
commission members to have, Jennifer,
A kayak,
around.
it could be a good way, and I have a kayak at my house that's not there, but it's not that far from there.
Yeah.
If you want to.
But if we're to get someone to give us a little walk. it's
If
probably
you
not
can,
bad.
yeah.
Let me give that a try, because I think it's a great idea. So,
I
shellfish?
think I heard that the broker had given over 100 tours. I mean, she's.
So you can give one more, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna make a lot of money. So. I'm going to explain what we had, just very quickly, and
Sure.
then I'll put on up here where we are now.
So.
We had a talk with CT Aquaculture the other day. If you all don't know it, our shellfish beds have been closed.
So the recreational beds are the purple areas here. This purple area is not suitable for recreational shellfishing, so let's forget about that.
What do you mean by that?
There's too much wave action, so
Okay.
clams couldn't kind of
What-
essentially
Why,
survive.
would they ever change that designation? Because it's ridiculous. You could never claim there.
I think that's right. Anyway, so the primary places that you can clam in Darien are this Great Island bed, right here,
Just where's Ziegler's Cove, just to orient,
right here.
that yellow.
And- yeah.
Okay.
And these
I'm
are,
sorry.
and these orange pieces are what are seasonally open, but I don't think anybody really uses that. The Contentment Island bed is useful. This bed here, the Fish Island bar bed, is partially useful. There's a bit of current that kind of rips through here. And so that's not good for clamming, but if you get kind of closer to the little float line that exists, I think we've all found some clams and oysters in there. But
Yeah,
it's,
and then a big part of it has a float line that's here, and people don't go in there because it looks like it's private property, even though it's not.
No.
so that's a kettle of fish for
Yeah, different day.
another day. But so what's happened here in Scotts Cove is that they've had some negative readings after particularly large rains, which have caused them to reclassify these two beds and kind of create a new line that goes across here
Here you
to
can
say that this is, so there's red, which is kind of permanently closed, and then there's yellow, which is, or green, which is restricted relay, which means you could take clams out of there and then put them somewhere else to allow them to depurate and then harvest them.
David, you refer people to the chart here.
Okay.
So it's changed from all being an open ocean into up here to now this area restricted relay
So
coming
everything in
down.
green there is now restricted relay, which essentially closes these two beds and leaves us with basically zero recreational clamming.
Well,
in
yeah,
Darien.
they said it's restricted relay, so if it was open, you would now have to take your clams and let them sit somewhere for 2 weeks. which
And I
is
think
good for
that's
public
not
clamming.
something that we
Yeah.
allow or encourage
But that's why it's
residents to
Yeah,
do.
that's why it's green, but then they did more than that. They put cross hatches, which means it's closed. And this area is closed too, and this area is closed, and this area is closed. They've closed everything.
And this is
The
because
Connecticut
the water's
Aquaculture.
not clean enough?
They've gotten some negative, some readings showing increased bacterial counts. And so there are some questions as to whether those two beds could be opened. Bill and I had a conversation with Alicia from the Department of
Alyssa Dragon, yeah.
Yeah,
So she's taking-
Aquaculture.
She's taken over the prior woman, I was just about to say.
Kristen?
Yeah. And it was a really interesting conversation. Some of it was, we don't have enough resources, we can't do the right job. Some of it was, for 3 years, we've been getting bad readings at these various sites, and we've kept you guys open. We've allowed you to keep doing your thing in this big water. But they had an FDA meeting, literally FDA governs this, and the FDA was flying in.
Sounds like she was cramming for an exam, basically, and trying to get all her work together for the FDA, and it's like, whoops.
Whoops, better close this off
Better
before I get in
close it.
trouble.
I think the only reason we found out about this is someone who had emailed me about our recreational beds maybe 4 years ago, took that email and emailed me back and said, hey, David, why are all these beds closed? And
It
I'm like,
closed literally overnight.
and
right?
so then I called the Shellfish Hotline myself and it said, they're closed. And I'm like, well, that's kind of weird.
Well, in some sense, that's the bad news, though, that she was reacting to, if you will, a bureaucratic visit. But on the other hand, she's doing her job. It's not
Yeah.
passing muster. So it's like, well, maybe it's good that they're closed. And the other thing is, they were trying to be lenient with us for 3 years because they wondered about if the readings were adequate because they weren't coming back enough. And basically, the rule is if they get 10% bad readings over a course of a year, and then is it over 3 years or no? I think it's just 10% in a year, they have to close it. So
I
there's
can't
like,
remember the exact rule. I think our threshold for rain for a closure was 3 inches previously, and 3 inches of rain is a lot.
That's
like
like
a
a monsoon.
Yeah, and so there've been a few monsoons over the course of the past, few years. And I think her idea is to allow it to be reopened under a lower threshold that might be
Like 1
an
inch.
inch or 2 inches, where you'd have more periodic closures during the year, but at least you could get in there.
But she's got some additional work she needs to do to be able to feel she has enough facts to make that case to the FDA. And she said the FDA may not accept it and may say we need to survey all our coastline, all our shellfish beds and coastline, not Scott, but the areas we use.
There was a bit of debate in some email exchanges about the cause of these failures, and I think the Department of Aquaculture takes the view that there's been increased development in Scott Cove, and that contributes to septic leakage from septic systems being on top of ledge rock. There was someone taking the other side of that, and so I don't know.
That's a real political hot potato.
Huge,
that
and
whole issue.
it's not help in CTD's viewpoint that they can't get access to the properties in Scott Cove nor on Contentment Island. And she mentioned that we may never be able to get this conditionally approved if we can't get some access to some of those lands for testing. I'm not sure if that's ever going to change for us. That's a David Knopf town question. Yeah. So one of the things she said she would try to do for us is get conditional approval based on like a 1 or 2 inch rainfall, a quicker trigger. But she noted maybe she wouldn't be able to get there, FDA wouldn't accept it if she didn't have the shore-based testing and or this survey of the grounds. And in that case, she said...
Is she trying to get access to actually physically sample, or is she trying to look at the septic fields themselves in the houses?
I'm not quite sure. I mean, it's common.
I think she mentioned having visited one of the sites many years earlier, and somebody's loafer went into some, kind of septic that was bubbling up to the surface, and that was as good a sign as any that there was a failure. Whether that still exists or not, I have no idea.
But if they can't get the ground surveyed in the FDA box, she said it could be a year or more, which just stinks. My posture to her was, what can we do to help? And so I'd like to go out with her on her boat. She brings a boat down and does her testing. So I said, when you get the next date, I'm in. And if any would you like to join, we'd love to have you there.
It's always interesting to talk to them. I mean, you learn a ton
Huge,
being out with them, and they know, 10 times more than we'll ever forget.
And they're protecting everyone on the coast from getting sick, so it's hard to just want to bash them for closing our grounds, because this is how we're protecting our citizens. So, but then when you hear some of it is bureaucratic and lack of human resources at CTD, you wonder how much of this is artificial and how much is real. And so one thing I suggested, could we help with the actual monitoring if you don't have enough people to monitor? And she said perhaps you could be some of the people who took samples for us after rainfall events. So they can't, like if you have a 2 inch rain, they can't shoot down there in a boat. They have other places to go and things to do. But we could take a sample for them. And that may be something we could help ourselves get conditionally approved on. So some hope there. So I've offered our services to do that. And we'll come back to you all, because I know you've got a variety of boats, and maybe we can all work out some sort of schedule of being on call to wait for a rainstorm and rushing out with our boats and taking, I don't know what you do, you just take one sample and mail it to them? I'm not quite sure.
It's something that most of the other shellfish commissions do very routinely throughout the course of the year. There is, CTD has, the Department of Aquaculture, and you've been up there with me, right? I mean, they have this huge lab, and they are every day testing water samples that are sent to them by other shellfish commissions, and they're also frequently testing the meats. I guess they need to test for bacterial content within the actual shellfish. I don't know if we aren't doing that since we aren't a formal shellfish commission. I never really understood distinction of why they are doing the testing for us. And it
It's
seems
supposed to be
other-
doing that for the last 5 years. What have you been doing?
Well, I don't know, you know.
Do you send them the samples, or do they get picked up, or, because there's gotta,
I think they have to go on ice, and
I
so
was just
I
gonna say,
don't
there's
know.
gotta
whole
be a
protocol.
temperature.
Yeah.
I don't know how they get to Milford, I have no clue.
But they even test for DNA, so they can tell different strains of diseases going through the shellfish and things like that.
But, I mean, I was out there last weekend and there were people clamming in the Great Island Bay.
No, it's discouraging.
Yeah,
There's no enforcement. of-
yeah. Well,
Here, if we,
Stomach bug will be a good enforcement. This damn Great Island shellfish.
probably shouldn't be
Yeah.
laughing about this,
but you know, here, we in Darien always have this thing about letting the state come in and dictate terms to us, right? We don't like that, because we like to think we are aware of our area, we've got local knowledge, we've got a bunch of smart people in town, we've got resources. So here's a case where the states come in and, you know, probably beneficially dictating something to us. But I really think it behooves us to figure out a way to, if it's a manpower issue with them, you know, supplement their manpower and take some control back of our situation if it's warranted. Who wants to open this thing if it's not warranted? But if it is, and if it's just sort of these bureaucratic and testing procedures, let's get in the game and see what we can't do here to keep our beds open. And that goes on expanding the use of the beds with the purchase of Great Island, and really, you know, being a leading tool to get people to the water. And so I think this is a big opportunity for us, even though it's pretty discouraging at the outset. So I'm going to come back to you guys, and maybe we have some motorboats poised in different months with rain events, and we scoop test tubes and mail them off or something. I don't know. But I'll come back to you if she's going to take us up on that with what might work.
I think there's just some element of being proactive with them. I've always had the sense that they're kind of overwhelmed, right? So being in front of them on this certainly couldn't hurt.
On this point, Eric Barrett is either in the process or just has recently moved to Norwalk. So, you know, he's been acting as our shellfish commissioner, not our official commissioner. But he'll be phasing out of that, as also out of the commission because of the move. David was our shellfish commission guy, commissioner in the past. Maybe one of you want to step up for that, or we sort of parcel the role out in different things, or maybe we all just have more involvement in the subject matter. It's I think a great area for us to execute. Let's see. The only other thing I had was some work we've been trying to do on the water quality side with social media. I don't know, has anyone seen any of the Darien patch posts that I've put out with Julie's help also? Maybe not.
I saw one of them.
That's what you mentioned.
Yeah.
Thank you. If I can type in this.
I just saw the one you sent to us.
I sent the one with the dolphins, but I don't know if I sent the actual article. I think I might have written that
I
one.
remember seeing something with a picture of you too, so.
Okay. Of course, I wrote in the wrong thing. For those who hadn't, I'll just quickly bring them up if I can. What am I doing wrong? That's being stupid.
That church is in
Yeah.
So community news and
Darien.
let's see, we just.
That's not our church.
So here's one we put up, if you guys are seeing it, coastal water sampling days after dolphins sighted off Long Neck. Well, it's discouraging to have something nice news with Hank Warnick's picture of the dolphins, and then a couple weeks later the shellfish beds are closed, quite frankly. But the Darien Men's Association, you know, is a big help in this, and in this case it was all Darien Men's Association guys going out. There was 4 of them, I think. And I grabbed Hank's picture, which Flip sent on me, because I just thought it was, you know, marvelous. Why are we doing this? This is part of the reason, because we're trying to have clean water. I just had a little blurb, one paragraph write-up, and brought some pictures into the element,
It's good.
which I
You know, while it's great to publicize clean water, I'm struck by that if there are people who are clamming on closed shellfish beds, that maybe there should be some mention,
Well,
although it's not positive news, that the beds are closed and you shouldn't be harvesting
well,
shellfish. And
I agree, that's where I was, actually, 2 weeks ago, I just posted, 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, the dolphins article with these nice pictures of guys doing their job. And then the shellfish bed's closed, and I'm sitting and wondering, what's the segue here? But I guess that there's like the economy, there's ups and downs, and you broadcast it all.
Yeah,
And
try
it's
to get
info.
better longer term, but we got it down.
Well, we're testing tomorrow, and I was thinking of throwing something out with the shellfish bed closer map. I don't know, Julie, what you might think of that. I think
Like maybe two
how we
separate
blend it
posts,
in,
yeah.
yeah.
I'm not sure posting it together is great.
A little bit fish.
But we've tried that, so this one we did, and then another one here. Trouble working this computer, it's new, and
It's like the Empire State Building.
and there was just another one, just maybe this is the one I sent around that we're in full swing. Just to give a sample, you know, I'm just trying to get us some fanfare. As an overly shot, focusing too much on me, sorry. There's some of the guys and Julie with the equipment. Just trying to get some public consciousness about us doing sampling, and it's, you know, a lead for having people say, hey, let's go down to the water and take a look. And we're trying to do something like, you know, every 2 weeks when we go out and sample. We've tried to get the town's social media person involved. We haven't had a response from her. We had initial session with her, and then it hasn't seemed to go anywhere. I'm not sure if she's, you know, totally consumed with Great Island or other efforts, but we've sort of taken it on ourselves just to do it on the patch for the moment. We'd like to do more on the town's website. Maybe that's where we'll get in a month or two, I'm not sure, with the town maybe being more helpful. I don't know, but
Yeah, I mean, I think David's right that we need publicity on the climbing beds probably sooner rather than later, so we don't have people in the hospital. Right, so that should go on the patch as well as the town website, I would think. Just-
There is the shellfish hotline that you're supposed to call, but honestly, I wouldn't even think to call it absent a big rain event, because
Yeah, we're open.
well, here we are with, you know,
Is
this.
there a email database of the people that have shellfish licenses
yes,
that you could, you know, because it's not a huge.
that would be a David Knopf.
That's who it lies with, our health director.
Yeah.
But, you know, think of all his duties. He's not a coastal focused guy. He's trying to make sure the restaurants in town are safe. He's got his hands full. And I think this is where, if we built up more, you know, reputation on this, we might be looked to for more of this type of notification.
But I think it would be worthwhile to mention to him that
I mean, I think the beds are
shooting-
closed, that we have some obligation to let people
Yeah,
know.
All right.
Have the beaches been closed lately?
Once,
Have
so
it?
far this summer.
Early in the summer, kind of, or
Well, when did we have that in Shireen? It was over in Shireen, that was, feels like that was a month or more
ever,
ago. but-
forever ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what rain is like.
It'd be great.
Maybe, I don't know, say like maybe a month ago.
Yeah, okay, I was just curious.
What was interesting with everybody on the 4th of July weekend, I was kayaking through Scott and Zegos, so many people swimming. And I had just literally learned that all the shellfish tails. Just so I don't. Also, the Unified Water Study's been testing that water, and it doesn't do bacteria. And I'm sort of like, well, maybe that's been a miss. We should be doing bacteria every time. It's sort of it's longer term about where oxygen is and chlorophyll, and you know, again, I think we're relying on the state for this stuff, and maybe we all should be generating more of the info right here.
Isn't the health department testing the water for the bacterial count? The
They-
raised ones?
In different areas. They test near the beach.
Beach focused, yeah, and they, they're, a lot of times it just relies on rain count, they don't have the people also. The rain count's actually meant to be pretty accurate, once you get an understanding of how it works, and, you know, in terms of your testing, and you see an inch of rain, and, you know, now you test for the third time after an inch of rain, it's always bad bacteria. They stop testing, and just make the rule of 1
Make the
inch.
assumption.
Yeah, and then there's a 24-hour dilution period, and then it's fine. Well, anyway, I think, yes, I'll put out a post on just the closures. I think that's a good thing, and that'll be separate from what you post. Yeah.
You're not gonna touch the third rail of what is the cause of the pollution.
No, no, that's more than the third rail. Yeah, I agree. You know, it's there's a whole advocacy that one could undertake on this stuff, and it does have to do with septics. And then you actually, the aquaculture person, I thought, phrased it well. You swing away from the town, really, and you get to the state government and their need to push rules for latest technologies for septic systems. And out in Long Island, they do that massively. There's quite an effort. But Connecticut's void of any laws about latest technologies. And so I think we're all in compliance here. David Nosman strongly pointed that. But we're not being forced to go to a higher level and make that across state. And with state funds and infrastructure funds that might flow through the federal government down to help with that type of stuff.
Yeah, there's not a lot of federal money or state money to do that anywhere. I mean, either to actually replace all the septic fields, it's
It's huge. Yeah.
gazillions of dollars, and they're just chipping away on it at the margin right now. It's not really being actually addressed anywhere.
It's interesting because we've gotten so much money through Long Island Sound study, you know, the EPA organization, through Murphy and Blumenthal recently. It's just some of those.
To replace the septic fields.
No, they have
billions. And
Yeah,
billions
but
of dollars.
you wonder if they might have leaned that way for initial phase-in projects and funding or something, but nothing mentioned at all. Yeah. It's a little bit of a discouraging area. It's sort of like you know, climate change stuff. You're sort of like, okay, I'll buy a Prius, but what good's it going to do if the problem's so large?
If I still have a boat that gets 1 mile a gallon.
Listen, that was it for me. Is there other business people would like to bring up?
The one thing I would just add to one of the projects that we've kind of had on the front burner, back burner, front burner, the reviewing our mooring standards for Darien Harbor, that talking with John Keena, that definitely is something that we will get to, probably in the fall and winter, but it's definitely something that we should collectively do, and he's looking forward to our input and assistance.
He's gotten, it feels to me, bigger fish frying.
Yes.
He's in some ways, I think he's raced ahead of us and is into details and players that we haven't had reach with, and he's got a big bull by the horns, and I don't know how we can quite help him on some of the stuff. He's
Well, I
trying to
think the
define
things
it.
he's grappling with are squarely within the harbor master's purview, and they're not within our purview necessarily.
Yeah.
Is that the waiting list? Is that
Yeah,
one of the big-
he's spending, he definitely right now is, I don't want to speak for him, but he's spending a lot of time trying to understand who actually is on the moorings in the harbor, who is actually on the wait list, and he's just trying to get a good sense of what's actually happening out there in the field.
Can I ask one question? Is there any requirement of having a currently registered boat on a mooring? If you had an expired registration, would that be inappropriate?
Well, I think you're in trouble then, because I think you have to have a registration and insurance, and you have to submit those to the harbor master to get your mooring.
Because I can think of one in particular that I've passed that's many years out of registration.
There's, I think to what Grant was asking earlier, there's past practice, and then there's, when you say, is there any actual requirement? This is, not always as clear what the
Yeah.
requirements are relative to how has it been done in the past.
Okay, got it.
On a personal note, I have spent a lot of time with DMV this year, working out boat registrations and stuff like that for projects and things. And the new appointment system at the DMV in Norwalk actually is pretty smooth.
All right.
And so if you do have to go there, I would not dread it as much as you used to. I've had a number of good experiences and the people have been actually really pleasant lately. So, you know, not that you're rushing off to do that, but
Well, I remember moving here and I was told, you're gonna be here all day and bring your checkbook.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
That's good. The only thing I'd add about the John Keena's activities, I've been impressed by, he's doing the very thing I think, I think there's a lot of things he's doing and wait to see how they shake out. But he's doing the very thing I think we want him to do, and that is he's trying to take us to the next level. And that's getting the town also involved and getting the state involved in some things. And so it's not just saying, okay, the system out there works. He's saying, no, we want to make it better. How do we make it better? And he's getting more people involved. And I think that type of fresh air is what we were trying to encourage in the past, recent past. So anyway, I look forward to where we might inject more, but at the moment it sounds like he's got his hands full.
I just wanted to bring up an issue that one of people who's in the Bay raised, who's in conflict with the yacht club about the mooring of certain workboats and the unattractive nature of those workboats in front of their houses. And I know there's a conflict going on. I think there's been discussion between people in the neighborhood and the managers of the yacht club, and nobody came away particularly happy. And I know that under our purview, we're supposed to field questions from the public, and I'm not sure where to go with that if we have.
What's a
any.
workboat?
We talked
It's like
about,
a bar, like a flat barge with a bunch of stuff piled up on top.
was it, this would, where particular, there's the freight boats, those two, and then
No, this
Holly Pond,
this,
there's been something.
there's two of them in Darien Harbor. I think one is on the east side, and then one is in the little cove in front of, the yacht club that goes in
Yep.
between Proud Island
Yep.
or National.
And these are just like some docks with.
Yeah, with a bunch of stuff on it. I thought I sent you over some photos.
No,
What you say, these are
sorry.
yacht club boats?
Yeah,
Yes.
there are mooring
work
barges.
Those are mooring
boats.
barges.
And the complaint was, well, they should be on the yacht club docks, but the moorings, I think, are yacht club moorings, and
That's, yeah, I mean, it's a typical NIMBY sort of thing. You can't have moorings in the harbor without the boats to work on them. And you have to have something. And so, that's not actually the way the law works.
I mean, you can't say somebody's boat's too ugly.
Yeah,
yeah, I wasn't sure what the protocol was with, whether it's actually not a boat, I was asked.
It's a work.
yeah,
It's a
it's a
barge.
commercial, it's a commercial boat which has a
commercial
different sort of regulatory status. And so, I don't know if there's been actually any big conversation with Yacht Club about this particular issue. I mean,
I think Wim, yeah.
I think there's been one email sent in, but there hasn't been like a big conversation. But in any event, the regulation of that is done by DEEP.
Okay.
But do we know who the owners of these barges or vessels
It's the
are?
Rowan Yacht
This
Club.
is the Rowan Yacht Clubs.
Yeah.
That's what I was asking, yeah.
So, yeah, so if anyone who wants a mooring in the harbor, they should be happy to have those
Yeah.
boats in the harbor.
That's what we refer to as the mooring picker upper.
Well,
Yeah.
But one could presumably ask the Rowan Yacht Club to keep it in a nicer spot because of.
In
Where?
in front of somebody else's house is what they're asking for. That's literally what they're asking for.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah,
I
that
mean, it gets used to inspect the moorings. I mean,
Yeah, no, I
Hank
understand,
went
yeah.
out on it, and my husband actually went with him and thought it was the greatest thing he'd ever done, to pull up our mooring and do the every 3-year inspection. So he's actively going out and using it.
So it moves
And
around.
it uses and services more people than the Norotan Yacht Club. It services the moorings over in Norotan Bay, right? Which are
Yeah.
Bay resident moorings. So they're getting the benefit of it as well. There are moorings in Darien Harbor that are not associated with their own yacht club. They're town residents, sometimes they're not town residents, but those are often serviced by that same barge. So,
Yeah, I think this particular resident and the residents didn't have boats and were concerned
weird
about that.
place to live.
They just
Maybe it's
felt they were paying taxes and they didn't like the
No,
aesthetic
I mean,
value
it's,
of the
it's,
workboat.
it's literally that issue, which is, the same with freights, fishing boats, which is, those things don't look as nice as you might like them to look, but you gotta put them somewhere.
Is
Yeah.
the
We have
barge
the same
moving around
issue
enough?
with Mr. Freight's little skiff, which is not at all attractive. And the Parks and Recreation Commission has accommodated him and let him put it on the inside of the boat launch. And, some people don't like looking at it, but unfortunately, there's literally nowhere else for him to put it to access his boat, so we've
That's
accommodated
not true.
him.
It was for years on the anchor chain at the boat club.
They won't,
That was pretty ugly there. I always thought.
they will not take it.
I
Just leave it at
didn't,
that.
I didn't know that.
So you can't practically just tie it up to the docks, that doesn't not
So the
practical.
response is it really has to be a negotiation between the yacht club and the people in the neighborhood.
It's not really
to work
a
out
negotiation, it's a
between
matter
themselves.
of permits with DEEP, and
Yeah.
with the permits, there's not a discussion.
Maybe they could be asked to move it around more, because it's staying in one spot in front of one resident's house too much.
Well, it sounds like it's on yacht club moorings, which don't by definition move.
Yeah, well,
We're trying to have, I mean, I happen to be right in the middle of that discussion, but we are trying to talk to the neighbors and see what we can do around the margin to, dress up the,
it just needs a green tarp. That's it.
but there's a limit to what practically speaking is possible.
Something about a pig's ear and silk purse or something. Does anyone else have any other business or a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, good, anyway, so we'll close for tonight. Had a good discussion. We got a couple of follow-ups. One is the tour, which I thought was a great idea. And I'll keep on seeing where we can have a voice at the table on some of the Great Island stuff. Yeah. Nice meeting, everyone.
Thanks.
Good deal.
Just